I still remember that day vividly. It's forever etched in my memory not only because of the events that occurred, but also because it was the day we moved into our new home. My husband and I had been saving for years, and finally, we were able to buy our dream home. It was a sweltering July day when we pulled up to our new abode. After signing all the papers, we finally became homeowners. The house was empty, a clean canvas ready for us to fill with our life. Stepping out of the car, we immediately made our way to the house before us. It wasn't a grand mansion, but rather a charming two-story cottage nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The house exuded a cozy and welcoming atmosphere, although it didn't quite live up to the grand visions we once painted in our fantasies. Approaching the front door, I felt excitement bubbling up. We eagerly unlocked the door and stepped inside. The interior of the house was a delightful blend of traditional charm and modern touches. The living room was bathed in warm sunlight streaming in through the windows. Perhaps it was the influence of emotions, but at that moment it felt like the most beautiful home. A large bay window looked out onto a well-maintained garden, promising tranquil evenings. Off the living room was a compact kitchen. Despite its small size, the kitchen exuded an atmosphere of efficiency and practicality. Upstairs were two cozy bedrooms. I remember wandering around the house with eyes sparkling with excitement. My husband, watching me, couldn't contain his joy. We had fulfilled a long-cherished dream, but that wasn't all this day was about. The previous owners had left behind some furniture and other items that were no longer needed. So, we decided to clean up and get rid of everything unnecessary. We didn't need those old things either, but it was interesting to examine them. Soft plush sofas, covered in thick layers of dust, had long gone out of style. They looked sloppy and dismal. It was interesting to watch as time ruthlessly erased the traces of past grandeur. What was once the centerpiece of this house had now become unnecessary and pathetic. I stepped onto the creaky stairs leading to the second floor. Their worn covering didn't shine with aesthetics, but they performed their function reliably. Ascending, I found myself in a spacious, light-filled corridor where several paths diverged. Before me gleamed a large window, beyond which sprawled a green, unkempt lawn. However, it wasn't this window that caught my attention, but what was above it. A small, inconspicuous door led to the attic. When we bought the house, we weren't present for the attic inspection. That was handled by the inspection. She was checking something up there, but we weren't concerned with it. Honestly, I'm sure they went up there and saw something. We just received the report and that was it. The house looked tidy, and I didn't think there could be any problems there. But curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to climb up to the attic and see what was there. I pulled the handle and, lowering the folding ladder, ascended to the attic. I was hit by the hot, musty air, thick with dust. It was evident that nobody had been up here for a long time. The attic was shrouded in impenetrable darkness. There were no windows, and if there was any ventilation at all, it wasn't working. The air was so hot and musty that breathing was almost impossible. Feeling around, I found a small switch and turned on the light bulb. Dim, yellow light flooded the room, but it barely sufficed to avoid stumbling over the scattered junk everywhere. The attic was cluttered with old things, long unnecessary and past their prime. Probably, these were the belongings of the old homeowner who lived here before us. Taking a few steps forward, I stubbed my toe on something. Barely avoiding a fall, I managed to grab onto a massive beam protruding from the wall. Phew! I exhaled. There's clearly work for several days here, I thought, looking around. But it's okay, we'll manage. I encouraged myself. I decided to look around. Boxes piled up everywhere, covered with thick layers of dust and cobwebs. In the corner lay an old, rolled-up object. I couldn't make out what it was. It was unlikely to be a carpet. Most likely these were some items, carelessly packed and scattered about haphazardly. But one corner of the attic was almost clear of clutter. The boxes around it were neatly arranged in a circle. Interesting, I thought, approaching the spot. In the center stood a small coffee table, and next to it was a cozy rocking chair, as if from an old movie. I imagined the old lady rocking in it on the veranda, watching life go by. I thought. There was a record player on the table. I wonder if it works. A thought crossed my mind. Inspecting the record player, I found a cord leading to the socket, which I promptly plugged in. The player was obviously very old but in good condition. There were hardly any scratches on it, just a thick layer of dust. Opening the lid, I saw that there was already a record inside. Very intriguing, I thought. I turned on the record player, placed the needle on the record, and the speakers crackled to life again. After a few seconds, a melody began to play. Oh, it was something very beautiful, very melodic. You know, the kind of songs people usually waltz or do other ballroom dances to. Well, something like that. The music filled the room. It was a beautiful melody that I had never heard before. Phew, it's very hot up here, and the air is becoming more stale. Breathing is getting harder. Definitely, this attic could use some ventilation. Advancing a bit, I felt dizzy. Sounds like it's time to wrap things up and head out then. Just as I was about to stop the record player, my head started spinning, and I felt lightheaded. Attempting to steady myself by reaching for the nearby chair, my hand slipped off its edge and I began to fall. I barely managed to extend my right hand and close my eyes. Opening them a moment later, I found myself in the center of a vast room. It wasn't even a room. There were no walls or ceiling, just a stone floor. Everything around was dark, illuminated only by the firelight in various parts of the room, giving me glimpses of something. Pairs of dancers whirled around me. Lowering my gaze, I realized I wasn't wearing my own clothes. I was dressed in some kind of dress. The dress looked unnaturally red, burgundy, with some parts torn and riddled with holes. My thoughts were interrupted by a sharp blow to my shoulder, almost knocking me off my feet, but I miraculously managed to stay standing. Raising my eyes for a moment to assess what had happened, I could only utter one word. I was attacked by a couple, a partner, or whatever it was. I don't know. A skeleton with high skin. Her entire face had long since dried up, and in some places bones were even visible. On her head there was what could be reminiscent of hair. Her whole dress was torn. It had no eyes, only holes in its skull, but they showed me how it looked at me. My breathing suddenly stopped. My heart was pounding, jumping, and squeezing. I still don't understand how it didn't explode because of the fear I saw. Her gentleman was some kind of mass. It was a large, shapeless scarf in a suit. Only later did I realize that this is what people who drowned look like. They swell. I think what happened to him during his life was what appeared. Then I had no time for analysis, and I had nothing to do at all. Afraid of the light and moving, it seems like an eternity has passed. The music that I liked sounded ominous at first. The rooms were filled with different creatures. All sorts of corpses were circling around me, devils on their hooves, standing, some kind of terrible noise, and only then did I realize that it was screams and screams. I'm in hell, I realized. Before I could finish my thought, I was immediately swept into a dance. A guy was looking at me. He had eyes and skin. His hands were cold. I remember my first time, he said quickly. First time? I asked quietly, with concern. Yeah, what's surprising about that? I continued to clumsily dance with him amid all these beings. The ball, an endless dance. Everyone thinks they'll find light at the end of the tunnel, but before you even have a chance to close your eyes, you're suddenly here. It's a kind of revelry, a last chance for leisure, or the only one. Such things don't happen here often. Usually, newcomers don't immediately end up at the ball. And where do they end up? I asked immediately. Well, it's not a fairy tale, he replied vaguely. What is this place? Who are you? I screamed hysterically. Quiet down, they don't like troublemakers here. Don't ruin the celebration for the departed, he said calmly. But how did you end up here? Well, he turned his head to the side. There was a hole in his head, around which there was long dried blood. Can't live with that, he continued. Well, I was lucky too. Look at him at least. He pointed to a well-dressed man wearing a hat, but below his eyes only a piece of skin hung, representing his entire lower jaw. Emu is worse, as you might have guessed, or these dried skeletons. And what happened to you? He asked me with obvious curiosity, expecting some kind of story. I'm fine, I blurted out. He laughed loudly, and I had said it so loudly that other couples heard it too and started laughing as well. The man without a jaw couldn't do that, but he indicated with his whole demeanor that it was amusing. Well, if you don't want to say, of course you don't have to. The important thing here is just one. We're all here because we're dead, he said. But I'm alive, I blurted out sharply, pushing my partner away from me. Suddenly, everyone stopped dancing and started staring at me. Yes, I screamed. I'm alive. This is all a dream. It's all a dream. You're not real. I couldn't stop. The crowd began to part. Someone was clearly coming towards me. Anxiety began to set in again, and I could no longer contain it. Sharply clutching my stomach, I vomited on someone. Looking up, I saw in front of me a man who was holding the intestines from his stomach in his hands. Without having time to stop from what I saw, I immediately vomited again. This time, when I was able to raise my eyes, I saw a large shadow in front of me. It did not have an exact shape, a clot of blackness. You don't belong here, I heard, and the shadow immediately lunged at me, enveloping me in darkness. Opening my eyes, I saw that I was lying on the floor. My husband lifted me into his arms and tried to bring me to my senses. Looking with his frightened eyes, he asked nonstop, "What happened? Are you okay? How do you feel?" I don't know. I felt like I couldn't breathe, and then I must have passed out. Yeah, there's nothing to breathe here. The roof heated up. There were no windows. And why did you even come here? Did you hear the music? What music are you talking about? Are you okay? I'm better now. I found a record and put it on. I got up and went to the record player, but there was no record. The record player hadn't even been opened. The layer of dust on it indicated that it hadn't been touched. It wasn't even plugged in. Listen, maybe we should go downstairs. I must have imagined all of that, I suggested. It's been several years now, and I still can't understand if it was real or if my brain just made it up. Everything seems so real. I think someday I'll find out. We'll all find out. But we soon sold the house and moved.